The elevator doors opened on the 47th floor, and Seraphina Crosswyn stepped out into chaos. Her assistant was running toward her, tablet clutched against her chest, eyes wide with panic. The entire office had gone silent, every face turned toward the wall of screens displaying the morning's financial news. Seraphina's heart dropped before she even saw the headline. Vale Industries acquires Meridian Tech in surprise midnight deal, Crosswyn Enterprises left in the cold. The numbers scrolled past. For $1 billion. The contract she'd been negotiating for 6 months, the deal that would have catapulted her company into the tech sector's elite, had been stolen. Not just stolen, annihilated. Caldrin Vale had swooped in at midnight, offered twice what the deal was worth, and closed it before sunrise. The screens showed his face now, that sharp jawline, those cold gray eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. The business world called him the corporate executioner, and watching her life's work crumble around her, Seraphina understood why. She walked into her office without a word, closed the door, and stood at the window overlooking the city. Down there, somewhere in that forest of steel and glass, Caldrin Vale was probably celebrating. She pressed her palm against the cold window and made a promise to herself. She would destroy him, whatever it took. If you're ready for a story about enemies who become something far more dangerous, hit that subscribe button now. Trust me, you won't want to miss where this goes. Drop a comment and let me know if you've ever hated someone so much it scared you. And don't forget to like this video because what happens next is going to blow your mind. Caldrin Vale stood in his penthouse office, watching the same news coverage with no emotion on his face. His CEO was grinning beside him, practically bouncing with excitement over the Meridian acquisition. But Caldrin wasn't celebrating. He was thinking about Seraphina Crosswyn. He'd been watching her for 3 years now, studying every move she made, every deal she closed. She was brilliant, ruthless, and the only person in the industry who'd ever come close to outmaneuvering him. The Meridian deal wasn't just business. It was a message. "She's going to come for you now," his CEO said, finally noticing Caldrin's silence. "Crosswyn doesn't take losses well." "Good," Caldrin replied, his voice low and controlled. "I'm counting on it." The truth was, Seraphina Crosswyn had become an obsession. Not the healthy kind. The kind that woke him up at 3 in the morning, that made him pull up footage of her presentations just to watch the way she commanded a room. He told himself it was professional rivalry, strategic analysis. But late at night, alone in his office, he knew it was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Their first face-to-face confrontation came 3 days later. The Global Business Summit had them both scheduled for the same panel discussion on corporate ethics. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Seraphina arrived early, taking her seat on the stage with perfect composure. She wore a deep red suit that looked like war paint, her dark hair pulled back severely, every inch of her radiating controlled fury. When Caldrin walked onto the stage, their eyes met for the first time in person. The air between them crackled. He took his seat 2 chairs away from her, close enough that she could see the slight curl of his lips, that arrogant almost smile that made her want to throw something. The moderator started with softball questions, but everyone in the audience could feel the tension building. They were waiting for the explosion. It came when the moderator asked about competitive practices in emerging markets. Seraphina's answer was pointed, surgical. She talked about companies that used predatory tactics, that destroyed competition through sheer financial brutality rather than innovation. She never said Caldrin's name, but everyone knew exactly who she meant. When it was his turn, Caldrin leaned forward, his gray eyes locked on hers. "Ms. Crosswyn makes an interesting point about brutality," he said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "But I wonder if she's confusing strength with cruelty. In business, as in nature, the strong survive. Perhaps what she calls predatory is simply evolution in action." "Evolution," Seraphina repeated, turning to face him directly. The moderator was forgotten. This was between them now. "Is that what you call it when you steal deals in the middle of the night? When you offer twice the market value just to keep competitors from having a chance? That's not evolution, Mr. Vale. That's desperation disguised as dominance." The audience was silent. Caldrin's smile widened just a fraction. "Interesting that you see it as desperation. I call it winning. But then again, I suppose the view looks different from the losing side. Seraphina stood up. The moderator tried to intervene, but she raised a hand, silencing him without breaking eye contact with Caldrin. You want to talk about winning? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how your company has been investigated 7 times in the last 5 years for antitrust violations. Let's talk about how many smaller companies you've crushed just because you could. You're not a businessman, Mr. Vale. You're a bully with a board of directors. Caldrin rose to his feet as well, and suddenly they were face to face across the stage, the 2 chairs between them feeling like miles and inches all at once. He moved closer, stepping around the chairs until he was right in front of her. The audience held its breath. You think you know me, he said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. You think you understand what drives me. But you don't have the first clue, Seraphina. And that's going to be your downfall. She tilted her chin up, meeting his gaze without flinching. Up close, she could see flecks of silver in those gray eyes, could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. Her pulse was racing, but she refused to step back. My name is Ms. Crosswyn to you. And the only thing falling is going to be your empire. I'm going to take everything from you, piece by piece, until you understand what it feels like to lose. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Something passed between them, something hot and sharp and completely inappropriate. Then Caldrin smiled, a real smile this time, and it transformed his entire face. I look forward to watching you try. He walked off the stage, leaving her standing there, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The audience erupted into chaos, but all Seraphina could think about was the way his eyes had darkened when she'd said his name, the way her body had responded to his proximity. She hated him. She absolutely hated him. So why did part of her want to follow him off that stage and finish this conversation somewhere private? The next 2 weeks were warfare. Caldrin made a move on one of Seraphina's key suppliers, trying to lock them into an exclusive contract. She countered by offering their competitor better terms, effectively cutting Caldrin out of the supply chain entirely. He responded by poaching 3 of her senior executives with salary packages she couldn't match. She retaliated by launching a new product line that directly competed with his flagship offering, undercutting his prices by 30%. The business press was having a field day. They called it the Battle of the Titans, plastering both their faces across every financial publication. Wall Street was taking bets on who would break first. Neither of them noticed that they were both starting to look exhausted, that the war they were waging was consuming every hour of every day. Then everything changed. Seraphina was in a late-night meeting with her legal team when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but something made her answer. The voice on the other end belonged to Marcus Chen, the Deputy Director of the Federal Trade Commission. Ms. Crosswyn, I'm calling to inform you that the FTC has been monitoring the competitive practices between your company and Vale Industries. The economic disruption you're both causing is unsustainable. We're invoking emergency regulatory powers to mandate a temporary joint venture between Crosswyn Enterprises and Vale Industries. You have 24 hours to comply or face antitrust prosecution. Seraphina's blood went cold. You can't be serious. You're forcing us to work together? For a minimum of 6 months, yes. You'll be jointly managing the Meridian Tech acquisition and establishing protocols for fair competition going forward. The details will be sent over within the hour. I suggest you contact Mr. Vale and figure out how to make this work, because the alternative is federal prosecution for both of you. The line went dead. Seraphina sat there, staring at her phone, feeling like the ground had just opened up beneath her. Work with Caldrin Vale? 6 months of mandatory collaboration with the man she'd sworn to destroy? It was impossible. It was insane. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I assume you got the call. My office, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Don't be late. CV. She threw her phone across the room. The next morning, Seraphina stood outside Vale Industries headquarters, forcing herself to walk through those doors. Everything in her screamed to run, to fight this regulatory order, to do anything except submit to working alongside Caldrin Vale. But Marcus Chen had been clear. comply or face criminal charges. She wasn't going to let him destroy her company through legal prosecution. The elevator ride to the top floor felt eternal. When the doors opened, she was surprised to find Caldrin himself waiting in the hallway, not an assistant or secretary. He looked different here, in his own territory. More relaxed. Or maybe just more confident. He wore a dark gray suit that matched his eyes, and for the first time, she noticed how tall he really was, how broad his shoulders were beneath that expensive fabric. "Ms. Crosswyn," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." She ignored the hand. "Let's be clear about something, Vale. I'm here because the federal government is holding a gun to both our heads. Not because I want to be. Not because I've suddenly decided you're anything other than a corporate shark with nice suits and no conscience." He lowered his hand, that familiar half-smile appearing. "Fair enough. Come to my office. We need to talk." His office was exactly what she'd expected, sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. What she didn't expect was the exhaustion she saw in his face when he turned away from her to pour 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. For just a moment, when he thought she wasn't looking, his shoulders sagged. "I didn't sleep last night," he admitted, handing her a glass. "I kept trying to figure out how this is going to work. 6 months of pretending we can collaborate when we both know we want to destroy each other." "At least you're honest about it," she said, taking the water but not drinking. "So what's your plan? Sabotage me from the inside? Use this forced partnership to steal more of my business?" Caldrin moved to the windows, looking out at the city. "No," he said quietly. "Actually, I was thinking we might try something radical." "What?" He turned to face her, and she was startled by the intensity in his eyes. "Honesty. Real collaboration. What if we actually try to make this work?" Seraphina laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You expect me to trust you? After everything?" "No," he said, moving closer. "I expect you to be smart enough to see that we're both screwed if we don't figure this out. The FTC is watching everything we do now. If we sabotage each other, we both go down. But if we actually succeed, if we show that we can work together, we might both come out of this stronger than before." She studied his face, looking for the lie, the angle, the trap. But all she saw was someone who looked as tired and frustrated as she felt. "You're serious? Dead serious? Look, Seraphina. Ms. Crosswyn." He sighed. "Ms. Crosswyn, I know you hate me. The feeling is mutual. But we're stuck with each other for 6 months. We can make it hell or we can make it work. Your choice." She wanted to say no. Every instinct told her to walk out of this office and damn the consequences. But he was right. They were both trapped. And maybe, just maybe, she could use this opportunity to learn his weaknesses, to find the perfect way to destroy him once this nightmare partnership was over. "Fine," she said. "But we're establishing ground rules. First, we maintain completely separate operations outside of the joint venture. Second, all decisions regarding Meridian Tech are made jointly. Neither of us gets veto power. Third, we keep this strictly professional. No games, no manipulation, no corporate espionage." "Agreed," Caldrin said immediately. "With one addition. We meet for dinner twice a week to discuss progress. Neutral territory, no assistants, no lawyers. Just us, talking honestly about how things are going." "Why dinner?" she asked suspiciously. He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Because I find that people are more honest over food. And because if we're going to work together, we need to at least be able to have a conversation without security having to separate us." Against her better judgment, Seraphina found herself agreeing. They spent the rest of the day hammering out the details of their forced partnership, establishing protocols, dividing responsibilities. It was exhausting and frustrating, and they argued about almost everything. But underneath the arguing, something strange was happening. They were actually listening to each other, actually considering each other's points. By the time Seraphina left Vale Industries that evening, she had a headache, a stack of documents to review, and a deeply unsettling feeling that Caldrin Vale might not be quite as one-dimensional as she'd believed. Their first official dinner meeting was 3 days later at a small French restaurant that neither of them had chosen, neutral territory suggested by Marcus Chin himself, probably to ensure they didn't try to poison each other. Seraphina arrived exactly on time to find Caldrin already seated, reading through what looked like the Meridian Tech integration plan. "You're early," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "So are you," he replied, setting down the documents. "I thought about what you said. About me being a bully. You're not entirely wrong." She'd been reaching for her water glass and froze. "I'm sorry, did you just admit I was right about something?" "Partially right," he corrected, but there was no heat in it. "I built Vale Industries by being aggressive, by never backing down, by crushing anyone who got in my way. It worked. Made me very successful and very wealthy. But somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started doing this in the first place." Seraphina sat back, studying him. This wasn't the Caldrin Vale she'd been fighting for months. This version seemed almost human. "So why did you start? What made you become the corporate executioner?" His jaw tightened. "My father owned a small manufacturing company. Nothing huge, just enough to support our family and his employees. When I was 15, one of the big conglomerates decided they wanted his market share. They undercut his prices, poached his clients, strangled his supply chain. Within 2 years, he was bankrupt. He killed himself 3 months after losing everything." The words hung in the air between them. Seraphina felt something crack in her chest, that wall of hatred developing its first fissure. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "How could you?" Caldrin said, signaling the waiter for wine. "It's not exactly in my public bio. But it's why I am the way I am. I swore I'd never be the one getting crushed. I'd always be the one doing the crushing. The strong survive, remember?" "What was the name of the conglomerate?" Seraphina asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Crosswyn International Holdings," Caldrin said quietly. "Your father's company." The world tilted. Seraphina gripped the edge of the table, her mind racing. Her father's company. The business empire she'd inherited, that she'd built her own company from. It had destroyed Caldrin's family. She'd been so focused on hating him, on fighting him, that she'd never questioned why he'd seemed to target her specifically, why their rivalry had felt so personal from the very beginning. "I didn't know," she whispered. "My father never told me about individual acquisitions. I was in college when that would have happened. I swear, Caldrin, I didn't know." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw surprise in his eyes. "You really didn't, did you?" "No. And if I had, I would have." She stopped, not knowing what she would have done. "I can't change the past. I can't bring your father back. But I need you to understand that I'm not my father. Whatever he did, whatever destruction he caused, that's not who I am." "Isn't it?" Caldrin asked, but his voice was softer now. "You built your company the same way. Aggressive acquisitions, crushing competition. You're better at it than he was, actually. More strategic." "Because I learned from his mistakes," Seraphina said. "He was ruthless, yes, but he was also sloppy. He made enemies unnecessarily. I've tried to build something different, something more sustainable. But you're right. I've crushed people too. Probably destroyed families just like mine destroyed yours." They sat in silence while the waiter brought wine, poured it, and disappeared. Neither of them touched their glasses. Finally, Caldrin spoke. "I've spent 10 years hating everyone with the Crosswyn name. Planning how I'd destroy your company, how I'd make you feel what my father felt. But sitting here, listening to you, I'm realizing something. You're not him. And maybe revenge isn't as satisfying as I thought it would be." "What do you mean?" "The Meridian deal. I didn't really need it. I wanted it because you wanted it. Because taking it from you felt like justice for my father. But all it's done is create this mess we're both trapped in now. And looking at you tonight, seeing that you genuinely didn't know what your father did, I don't feel victorious. I just feel tired." Seraphina picked up her wine glass, took a long drink, and made a decision that terrified her. "I have a confession too. When we met at that summit, when we stood face to face on that stage, I felt something besides hatred. Something I've been trying to ignore ever since." Caldrin's eyes darkened. Seraphina. Don't, she interrupted. Don't say anything yet. Let me finish. You're right that we're enemies. Our companies are built on destroying each other's fathers. But in these past few days, working with you, arguing with you, I've started to see someone I didn't expect. Someone smart and driven and carrying wounds that match my own. And it scares the hell out of me because I don't know how to hate you and feel this at the same time. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. Then Caldrin reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, his grip gentle but firm. I felt it too. On that stage. And every day since. I told myself it was just the rivalry, just my mind playing tricks. But it's not, is it? No, she whispered. It's not. They finished dinner talking about everything except business. He told her about growing up, about watching his mother work 3 jobs to keep them afloat after his father died, about building his first company from nothing. She told him about the pressure of inheriting her father's empire at 25, about the loneliness of being the only woman in most of her meetings, about the weight of expectations she'd been carrying her entire life. When they left the restaurant, Caldrin walked her to her car. They stood in the parking garage, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, neither wanting to leave. This complicates everything, Seraphina said. Completely, Caldrin agreed. We're supposed to be enemies. We are enemies. Are we? He stepped closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Because right now, I don't feel like your enemy. I feel like someone who's been looking for you his entire life and didn't even know it. She should have gotten in her car. Should have driven away and never looked back. Instead, she reached up and pulled him down to her, kissing him with all the fury and frustration and unexpected longing that had been building between them for months. He responded immediately, his hands sliding into her hair, pressing her back against the car. The kiss was explosive, all the tension and hatred and impossible attraction finally finding an outlet. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Seraphina laughed shakily. We can't do this. This is insane. Completely insane, Caldrin agreed, but he was smiling, really smiling, and it made him look younger, almost vulnerable. See you at the office meeting tomorrow? Unfortunately, try not to be insufferable. You first. She got in her car and drove away, but when she looked in the rearview mirror, he was still standing there, watching her leave. And God help her, she didn't want to go. The next 6 weeks were a study in contradiction. In public, during official meetings and joint venture decisions, they maintained their professional rivalry, arguing over strategies, challenging each other's proposals. But underneath, something was growing. Private dinners became longer. Conversations became deeper. They started texting late at night, sharing frustrations about the day, making each other laugh with sarcastic observations about their industry colleagues. They were falling for each other, and both of them knew it, and neither knew how to stop. It was during a late-night strategy session in Caldrin's office, papers spread across his conference table, that things finally shifted completely. They'd been arguing about a proposed expansion plan, voices getting heated, when suddenly Seraphina slammed her hand down on the table. Why are you being so stubborn about this? The numbers clearly show. It's not about the numbers, Caldrin interrupted, standing up and pacing to the windows. It's about you. What? He turned to face her, and she was shocked to see raw vulnerability in his eyes. I'm terrified, Seraphina. I'm terrified that if we succeed at this partnership, we'll go back to being enemies when it ends. And I'm terrified that if we fail, we'll both be destroyed. But most of all, I'm terrified of what I feel when I look at you, because it's so much bigger than anything I've ever felt before and I don't know how to control it. She stood up slowly, walking around the table toward him. You think you're the only one who's terrified? I wake up every morning telling myself that today I'll stop caring about you, that I'll remember you're supposed to be my enemy. And then you smile at me during a meeting, or you send me a text at midnight, or you look at me like you're looking at me right now, and everything I promised myself disappears. Then what do we do? He asked, his voice rough. This, she said, closing the distance between them and kissing him again. This time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. His arms came around her, lifting her against him, and she wrapped her legs around his waist. He carried her to his desk, sweeping papers aside with one arm, setting her down on the polished wood. His lips moved to her neck, and she gasped, her fingers tangling in his hair. "We shouldn't," she breathed even as she pulled him closer. "Probably not," he agreed, his hands finding the zipper of her dress. "Tell me to stop." "I can't. God help me, I can't." They came together with all the passion and fury of their rivalry transformed into something else entirely, something consuming and desperate and perfect. Afterward, lying tangled together on the leather couch in his office, Seraphina rested her head on his chest and listened to his heartbeat slow. "We crossed a line tonight," she said quietly. "I know." His fingers traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "Are you sorry?" "No." "Are you?" "Not even a little bit." They kept their relationship secret for the next month. It was surprisingly easy to hide, given that everyone expected them to be enemies. They could argue fiercely during the day and know that night they'd be together, making up for every harsh word with touches and whispers and the kind of connection neither had expected to find. Seraphina started keeping clothes in Caldrin's office. He learned that she liked her coffee with too much sugar and not enough cream. They discovered they both loved terrible action movies and expensive wine and making each other laugh until they couldn't breathe. For the first time in years, Seraphina felt happy. Really, genuinely happy. But happiness, she was about to learn, was a fragile thing. The truth came out on a rainy Thursday morning. Seraphina arrived at her office to find her CFO waiting, his face grim. He handed her a folder without speaking. Inside were documents, corporate filings, legal papers, strategic plans. All of them outlined a detailed scheme for Vale Industries to acquire controlling interest in Crosswyn Enterprises through a series of shell companies and proxy votes. The plan was meticulous, brilliant even, and it had Caldrin Vale's signature at the bottom of every page. The documents were dated from 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks into their relationship. After everything they'd shared, every promise they'd made, he'd still been planning to destroy her company. To take everything from her. Seraphina felt something inside her shatter. She'd been a fool. An absolute fool. She'd let herself believe that what they had was real, that the connection between them mattered more than their business rivalry. But she'd been wrong. He'd been playing her all along, using their relationship to get close, to learn her weaknesses, to position himself for the perfect strike. She drove to Vale Industries with the folder in her lap, her mind eerily calm. When she walked into his office without knocking, Caldrin looked up from his computer with a smile that died the moment he saw her face. "Seraphina, what?" She threw the folder onto his desk. Papers spilled across the surface. "Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to wait until the takeover was complete and watch me realize I'd been sleeping with the enemy the entire time?" Caldrin picked up the documents, his face going pale as he recognized them. "Where did you get these? Does it matter? They're real, aren't they? Your signature, your plan, your betrayal. Everything we've been building together, every moment we've shared, it was all just part of your strategy. Revenge for your father, right? What better way to destroy me than to make me fall in love with you first?" "No," Caldrin said, standing up. "Seraphina, let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you're exactly the man I thought you were before I was stupid enough to believe you'd changed? That I was right to hate you all along?" "These documents are 6 weeks old," Caldrin said urgently, coming around the desk toward her. "I created this plan before the FTC forced us together, before we started working together, before you seduced me? Before you made me believe we had something real? Don't insult me by pretending you abandoned this plan. Your signature is on documents from 2 weeks ago, Caldrin. 2 weeks. We'd already been together. We'd already..." Her voice broke, and she hated herself for it. "God, I actually thought you cared about me." "I do care about you," he said desperately. "Seraphina, please, just listen." "No. I'm done listening. I'm done believing. I'm done with you." She turned toward the door, but he grabbed her arm, spinning her back to face him. "Those recent signatures were on updated documents because my lawyers needed them to cancel the whole thing," he said, his voice raw. "I called off the takeover 3 weeks ago. The day after our first night together, I contacted every shell company, dissolved every proxy arrangement, ended the entire plan. These documents aren't proof of betrayal. They're proof that I chose you over revenge. Seraphina stared at him, wanting desperately to believe but terrified of being fooled again. You're lying. I'm not. Call my lawyer right now. Call any of the shell companies. They'll all tell you the same thing. The takeover is dead. I killed it because I realized that destroying your company meant destroying you, and I couldn't do that anymore. I wouldn't. Why should I believe you? Because I love you, Caldrin said, and the words hung in the air between them like a confession and a plea. I know it's insane. I know we started as enemies. But somewhere between hating you and fighting with you and talking with you and touching you, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you. And I'm not asking you to forgive me for creating that plan. I'm just asking you to believe that I abandoned it for you. Seraphina felt tears burning in her eyes. She wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not in business, not in this relationship built on such complicated foundations. I need time. I need to think. How much time? I don't know. Maybe forever. She pulled her arm free and walked out of his office, leaving him standing there looking like she'd just destroyed his entire world. The next 2 weeks were agony. Seraphina threw herself into work, trying to bury her heartbreak in spreadsheets and conference calls. But everywhere she looked, she saw reminders of Caldrin. His coffee cup still sat on her office bookshelf, left there from a morning meeting. Her phone was full of their text conversations, months of messages that showed someone caring about her, asking about her day, making her laugh. She told him about her fears of not being good enough, of always living in her father's shadow, and he'd listened. Really listened. He'd seen her, all of her, in a way no one else ever had. Had it all been a lie? Her CFO presented evidence that Caldrin had indeed dissolved the shell companies, that the takeover plan had been abandoned weeks ago. But Seraphina couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been played, that somewhere in all of this was another trap she hadn't seen yet. Caldrin, meanwhile, was falling apart. His CEO had never seen him like this, distracted, unfocused, staring out the windows instead of dominating board meetings. Vale Industries started losing ground in key markets because their CEO was too heartbroken to notice. Finally, his CEO cornered him in his office. What happened with Crosswyn? Did she figure out the old takeover plan? She thinks I'm still planning to destroy her company, Caldrin said dully. She thinks I was using her the whole time. Were you? Caldrin looked at him with hollow eyes. I thought I was. In the beginning. But then I got to know her, and everything changed. She's brilliant and fierce and vulnerable in ways she'd never show anyone else. She trusted me. And now she thinks I broke that trust. Did you? I don't know anymore. Maybe I did by not telling her about the original plan. Maybe I broke her trust by falling in love with her when I was supposed to be her enemy. He laughed bitterly. The irony is that I finally have everything I thought I wanted. My company is successful, my father's memory is avenged, I've proven I'm the strongest. And I've never felt more empty in my life. So what are you going to do about it? That question haunted Caldrin for the next 3 days. What was he going to do? He could try to win Seraphina back, but how did you prove love to someone who had every reason not to trust you? He could let her go, give her the space she asked for. Or he could do something radical, something that would show her once and for all that she mattered more than business, more than revenge, more than everything he'd built his life around. On Monday morning, Caldrin called an emergency press conference. Every major financial news outlet showed up, cameras rolling as he took the podium. Seraphina was watching from her office, her heart in her throat, not knowing what he was about to say. 10 years ago, Caldrin began, his voice steady, my father's company was destroyed by Crosswyn International Holdings. He lost everything and ultimately he lost his life. I built Vale Industries with one goal, revenge. I wanted to be powerful enough that no one could ever hurt me or anyone I loved again. But somewhere along the way, revenge became my identity. I stopped being Caldrin Vale and became the corporate executioner. He paused, looking directly into the camera. 6 weeks ago, I planned to take over Crosswyn Enterprises. I had the means, the strategy, everything in place. But then something happened. I met someone who made me question everything I'd become. Someone who showed me that strength isn't about crushing others. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable, to care about something more than winning. Seraphina's hands were shaking. Today, I'm announcing that Vale Industries is restructuring. We're divesting from several aggressive acquisitions, returning autonomy to companies we've dominated, and implementing new policies focused on collaboration rather than conquest. More importantly, I'm exposing the corporate corruption that started the original feud between the Vale and Crosswyn families. He pulled out documents, holding them up to the cameras. These files show that both of our fathers were manipulated by a third party, a consulting firm called Strategos Partners that deliberately created conflict between companies to profit from their destruction. They convinced my father to take aggressive actions that threatened Crosswyn International Holdings, then turned around and convinced Mr. Crosswyn that my father was trying to destroy him. Both of our families were pawns in someone else's game. Seraphina felt the room spinning. Everything she'd believed about her father, about Caldrin's father, about their rivalry, it had all been built on lies. Lies that had destroyed both their families and set them on a collision course that had defined both their lives. I'm releasing these files to the public and to federal prosecutors, Caldrin continued. The people responsible for destroying both our fathers will face justice. As for me, I'm done being driven by revenge. I'm done letting the past dictate my future. And I'm done pretending that business matters more than the people we love. He looked directly at the camera again, and Seraphina knew he was speaking to her. To the woman I hurt by not being honest enough, fast enough, brave enough, I'm sorry. You deserved the truth from the beginning. You deserved someone who chose you first, not someone who had to learn how to choose you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect another chance. I just want you to know that you changed me completely, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you made me want to become. The press conference ended. Seraphina sat in her office, tears streaming down her face, her entire worldview shattered and rebuilt in the space of 20 minutes. Caldrin had just sacrificed his company's aggressive positioning, exposed himself to potential legal liability, and laid bare his vulnerabilities in front of the entire business world. For her, because he loved her. She grabbed her keys and ran. The drive to Vale Industries took 17 minutes that felt like hours. She didn't care that she was crying, didn't care that her hair was a mess, didn't care about anything except getting to Caldrin. When she burst into his office, he was standing at the windows, his back to the door. He turned, and the hope and fear and love in his eyes made her heart ache. I watched your press conference, she said, breathless from running. I know. I hoped you would. You just committed corporate suicide on live television. I know that too. For me. For us, he corrected, moving toward her slowly, like he was afraid she might disappear. For the chance that maybe, possibly, you might believe me when I say that you matter more than any business deal, any revenge, any of it. You're the most important thing in my life, Seraphina. You're the only thing that's real. She closed the distance between them in 3 strides, throwing her arms around his neck, kissing him with everything she had. He caught her, lifting her off the ground, kissing her back with equal desperation and relief and joy. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, she pressed her forehead to his. I love you, she whispered. I tried not to. I tried so hard to keep hating you. But I can't. I'm completely, impossibly, inconveniently in love with you. Inconveniently? He asked, smiling through his tears. Well, you are my business rival. This complicates things. Actually, Caldrin said, setting her down but keeping her close, I was thinking we might change that. What if instead of being enemies, we became partners? Real partners. Merge our companies, combine our strengths, build something neither of us could create alone. Seraphina pulled back to look at him. You want to merge Crosswyn Enterprises and Vale Industries? I want to merge our lives, our dreams, our futures. The business is just part of that. If you'll have me. If you can trust me. I trust you, she said, and meant it completely. I trust you because you chose me over everything you'd built your life around. Because you exposed your vulnerabilities to the entire world just to prove I mattered. Because you love me enough to change, and because I love you enough to believe in that change. So, is that a yes to the merger? She laughed, pulling him down for another kiss. It's a yes to everything. The merger, the partnership, the love, all of it. But Caldrin? Yes. We're keeping Crosswyn in the name. Crosswyn Vale Industries has a better ring than Vale Crosswyn. He grinned, that real smile that transformed his entire face. I wouldn't have it any other way. 1 year later, they stood together at a press conference announcing the official merger of their companies. But this time, they stood hand in hand, presenting not as rivals but as partners in every sense of the word. The business world called it the deal of the century. Their employees called it the best thing that ever happened to both companies. But Caldrin and Seraphina knew the truth. The real victory wasn't in the merger or the combined market value or the synergies they'd created. The real victory was in choosing love over hate, trust over revenge, and each other over everything else. They'd started as enemies, become passionate lovers, and crossed every line they'd sworn they'd never cross. And on the other side of those crossed lines, they'd found something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. They'd found home. So if you loved this story of enemies who became everything to each other, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more passionate romance stories. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever fallen for someone you were supposed to hate? What happened? I want to hear your stories. And remember, sometimes the person you're fighting the hardest is exactly the person you're meant to love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.